Hey everybody, it's Scott Steen with winnersandwhiners.com coming to you with our TGIF version of Today in Sports Betting. As always, I am joined by the one and only Scott Reichel up there from Long Island, New York. Scott, happy Friday. How are you?
Doing pretty well. I was busy yesterday writing some articles for the upcoming UFC card for tomorrow. So I did a preview article on the prelims and the main card separately. You can find that at winnersandwhiners.com. But other than that, yeah, still been grinding in online poker and been making some money out of it. So it could be worse.
Outstanding. And we have a very special guest today. We're going to take a look at the status of various sports around the country and around the world. And who better to do it than the one and only? He is the boss over there at offshoreinsiders.com. And you can catch him at Twitter at Offshore Insider. And he is all the way from Atlanta, Georgia, the home of Coca-Cola. It is Joe Duffy. Joe, how are you, my friend?
Well, Scott, thanks for having me on. Yeah, if Twitter only allowed one more character on your name, on your screen name or whatever, your handle, it'd be a lot easier. But that is true. Yes, plural on the website. And I'm looking to get back to work and get back to handicapping some sports. But thanks, guys, for having me on so we can talk about the state of sports and I guess speculate, because I don't know if anyone has any definitive answers, but we'll talk it out. We're going to solve all the world's problems before this video's out.
Yeah, that's right. We're going to do this. We're going to solve all the world's problems in 60 minutes or less. That is our promise to you, the viewer. So with that being said, Joe, thanks for being here. Let's get rocking and rolling, boys. I'm just going to start off with the what I think is probably the sport that is most likely to make an appearance before the others, and that is the MLB. They have actually put forth a formal proposal to the players that the players are chewing over right now. Just in a nutshell, it is planning for them to open spring training about mid-June with a 82-game schedule to start on July the 4th, 30-man rosters for a 5-man expansion there. 14 playoff teams are expanding one wild card in each league, and they're going to have the universal DH in both leagues. Should be able to wrap it up by the end of October. I know they had some originally talked about playing deep into the fall/winter, but I know they're worried about the virus making a comeback, so they're going to have it all wrapped up by November 1st. They're going to be playing in the regular home stadiums. Looks like no crowds, at least at the beginning. They're going to be playing, and this is kind of the unique part, they're going to be playing games within their division only, and also the corresponding division in the National League. So in other words, the AL Central teams would also play NL Central teams to minimize the travel. The owners have proposed a 50-50 revenue split, and the players said, no, that is not for us. Blake Snell, in fact, came out and he made news yesterday on Twitter saying that he won't risk it for less than his full salary. So, Joe, we'll start with the guest here. Are they going to be able to get this worked out? Are the players going to find something? Are they going to be able to reach an agreement where the players will be happy with the amount of money that they're getting for the short season?
Well, Scott, look, I hope more than any video I've ever done that in a couple months people are retweeting this and saying, boy, that Joe Duffy's take was terrible. It didn't age well. I don't think the problem's going to be coming up to a financial agreement. I just think that we're going to get close, and all of a sudden some of the players are going to get a little bit afraid because of the uncertainty. And this is a case where, look, 5% can outnumber 95%. If only 5% of the players say they're not going to play and it has nothing to do with finances, I honestly have serious doubts whether or not this is going to take place. But I do believe that if the players decide they're going to come back, I don't think coming to any type of financial agreement is going to be an issue. Look, Blake Snell, the entire world is taking a pay cut, and some people are taking a 100% pay cut. Scott has mentioned on the side, I do some restaurant writing. No other industry has been affected by that more than restaurants. We have, cooks out there and waiters and waitresses that are going from $25,000 a year to now trying to make half of that. So spare it to me, Blake Snell. Nobody's sending you to Afghanistan. The players, I think, will eventually realize they will have to take a pay cut, but I'm not so sure that that's 100%. That's just step one. I still have my doubts whether we're going to play, because I think a few players are going to be concerned, not because of money reasons, and they're going to wind up punting it down the road again. But I have my doubts whether it's going to start, but I don't think, the coming up to a financial agreement is really going to be the main deterrent.
Very good. Hey, Scott, how about you? Were you able to sleep last night, worried about poor Blake Snell and only getting half of his money?
Well, I know he probably added another trophy to his collection by winning the MLB The Show Players League. So maybe he has been able to sleep a little bit better at night because he won a video game tournament during the off season. But no, I mean, overall for Blake Snell, even though people can criticize him and say, well, you're still a rich athlete, you don't really need the money. I feel like, though, what he said might not be the most popular opinion, but it's probably the most consistent opinion among most players. They just simply want to get paid for actually going through the work. And they probably feel that even though it's kind of a tricky situation, because I can understand the players saying, well, you want us to do X, Y, and Z, but you're only going to pay us for X, so why would we agree to do that? And I can understand the owners saying, we're not going to pay you enough money or the same amount of money because we're not getting any ticket sales, so why should we pay you the same amount of money? So I can understand why there's a little bit of a debate from a financial perspective. In terms of which one I side with, I originally sided more with the players, but as I thought about it, I did realize that ticket money is definitely I'd say a primary source of revenue for the owners, and now that is completely non-existent, I do think that the players will have to make some sacrifices when it comes to actually making some ends meet with regard to their agreement with the owners. So I actually am leaning more on the side of the owners. Having said that, I'm kind of with Joe, where I'm a little bit skeptical of the whole thing working out. The only way that I see a league actually working in any sport is if you have a very solid plan in place for what would happen if one of your players, if not more of your players, ends up testing positive for corona. And the reason why I say that is, let's just say, for example, Joe already touched on it. Let's just say that you are going to start the league on, we'll make up a date. Let's say July 1st, right? It's going to be the first day. And then a week before the season starts, you have Mike Trout, Stanton, Judge, Mookie Betts, Cody Bellinger, some primetime guys, and they just say, I don't think it's safe, I don't want to play. What do you do? Are you going to go on with basically replacement players and just tell the teams it doesn't matter? Just as long as you put bodies out there, we'll market it? Probably not. I don't really think that's a good way to market your product if all your superstars, or at least a handful of your superstars, decide it's not safe. I don't want to be doing this. I don't think that's really a good start to your potential startup plan for the season. So that kind of concerns me. And I'm also a little bit concerned about how exactly they plan on going about doing this. There's been a couple of rumors with regard to logistics on maybe a two-state idea. You'd have one in, the desert, and you potentially have one in Florida. Now you've heard rumors about potentially it being in home stadiums. I'm not sure how easily the travel will be done, whether or not they're going to take buses, they're going to have to fly. There's a lot of question marks going on here. So even though this idea sounds good on paper, oh yeah, live sports as soon as possible. Yeah, live sports, whatever you can, that's great. I'm not really that realistic on how feasible this idea is. The main issue I have is what happens if one of your players on a roster tests positive for corona, and now the entire team is potentially in jeopardy of catching the virus. What do? You're not going to send them anywhere. You're going to quarantine this team? Are they going to have to forfeit all their games? There's a lot of question marks that are involved that I don't really think the MLB has an answer to at this point in time.
By the way, shout out for using the phrase two-state solution in baseball context.
I tried to avoid using that exact terminology, but that's basically what they were suggesting.
Well done.
I mean,
so Joe, I think we can all agree that Blake Snell's comments were a little tone deaf compared to how a lot of the people are struggling around the country to make ends meet. Is it going to be more tone deaf if they lock up a lot of tests, as people are still struggling to get tested in the country? They're talking about testing them every 3 days. Of course, they're not going to use the immediate test. They're going to use the test where they're going to be at like a 24-hour turnaround. So is that if we earmark a lot of tests for these major league teams to come back, is that going to be a little tone deaf? Is there going to be some blowback on that, Joe? What do you think?
No, that is an outstanding point, Scott. And I do think that there has to be widespread testing available to the public, or that is a 100% certainty. The answer to your question is yes. They're going to talk about, these privileged players. Now, in defense of them, they are at least going back to try to make a living. And of course, we're part of the collateral damage, not just people like us who handicap sports where our jobs are being affected. I realize we're not going to have full stadiums where the people that are working concessions, they're not going to go back to work right away. But even if you make your money from concessions, you still want to see that baby step. So I do think there will be people like us who are going to say still, the fact that they're able to go back to work, it's going to enable some other people to earn a living. But no, there's a 100% certainty if anywhere in the country, people, the regular folks aren't able to get tests, but yet the players are able to get tests, there is going to be some very serious blowback on that. That's the easiest question you've ever asked me, Scott.
Okay, so here's what they do in the KBO, Joe. In the Korean Baseball Organization, they are playing. They have social distancing in place. Everybody that's not a player basically is wearing a mask. If a player tests positive for the coronavirus while they're playing, they shut the entire league down for 3 weeks. Is that feasible here, something like that? Is that even remotely feasible in the United States?
Yeah, I don't know if it's remotely feasible or whether it's 100% necessarily. Obviously, you'd have to test every other player. And, let's not kid ourselves from a statistical standpoint. Healthy guys in their 20s, they are almost certainly going to recover from this. It's really the coaches, people that are our age that are probably a lot more vulnerable. But even if I were a coach, I would take that chance because I believe in not just life, but the quality of life. But still, these players are statistically in one of the least vulnerable categories. But yeah, if a player tests positive, you have to go out and test the other players. And depending on those results, then make a decision whether or not you need to cancel for 3 more weeks.
Yeah, so the question that I have as a follow-up is, do you think it's worth starting up the league if there's a decent chance that you're going to have to pause all your progress because one player might test positive? Because it ruins all flow that you would have just spent, I'd say, months trying to establish once again. I'm not necessarily sure if it's worth it. Let's just say you play a week. You have a week full of games that you do decently on television, and then after 1 week, one player tests positive for corona, and then you have to shut the whole thing down. Is it even worth it at that point?
I'm with Joe on this one. I think the 3 weeks is a little overkill for the entire league. I think you've got to take steps to backtrack and see who the players come in contact with. But yeah, at the end of the day, Joe's exactly right. The group that is least at danger is healthy. Well, it actually would be healthy women in their 20s because it does hit men a little harder. But yeah, they've started to have some symptoms with some of the younger children, some of the respiratory stuff that mimics Kawasaki disease. So that's not good. Obviously, the older people with other comorbidity factors, those people are at risk as well. So yeah, I'm with Joe. I think the quality of life here is something that you absolutely have to take into account when you're talking about this. It's not just surviving, but it's let's face it, it's thriving. It's doing our thing. So Joe, let's put it in terms that our viewers can understand. What do you think the odds are that baseball comes back, let's say by the middle of July? In 2 months, we're playing baseball. What's the odds?
Unfortunately, just playing the first game, I believe, is less than 20%.
So anything better than 4-1, you're getting a good price on your money.
Yeah, I believe so. I do believe so. For the reasons I stated at the beginning, I just think if 5% of the players say, I'm not coming back, they're not going to come back.
Does it matter what 5%, Joe? Like if we have Mike Trout or Cole Calhoun, does that matter if it's which guy that is?
Well, to be honest with you, I think it's more likely that it will be a guy like Mike Trout who's got plenty of money in the bank than these guys that they don't even know how much time they have in their career left. But I think it will make a slight difference. But all in all, I think even if the unlikely event that 5% would be so-called role players, I still think that they're going to decide not to resume.
Okay, fair enough. Scott, and what do you think the odds are baseball comes back within the next 2 months, 60 days?
I'd say that I'm pessimistic, but I'm probably not as pessimistic from an odds perspective as Joe is. If I had to guess, I would probably say around 40%. I know that I can understand why the odds are so low, but everyone knows that money talks, and if the KBO continues to actually pull in ratings in the primetime slot of 4 a.m., on ESPN, then I feel like the MLB might look over and say, when there isn't a midweek UFC card, we would pretty much dominate the ratings. And baseball has been trying to dominate ratings for a long period of time, and it's been failing pretty badly. So if they wanted a potential, I'd say, renaissance, so to speak, in the ratings department, I think the MLB might do whatever they can to actually start up the season. So I'm a little bit less skeptical, but at the end of the day, I'm not sure how practical it is. And one thing quickly about Blake Snell and how his comments might have been, off tune. The question that I have for you is he a lone wolf, or did he just speak up on basically what all the players were thinking? And I'm more leaning towards the latter. I think a lot of players feel the same way Snell did, but didn't have the guts to say it. So whether or not you agree with him, I don't think he's alone on that front. I'm just going to throw that out.
No, I don't know. I don't think he's alone. Judging by the blowback that he received on the comment, I don't think we're going to hear a lot of people join in the chorus. Joe, what do you think? Is Blake Snell a voice in the wilderness, or is he just the only one that had the cojones to speak up?
No, I don't think that he's a lone wolf by any stretch of the imagination. I think he's probably in the minority, but again, I think the minority could be larger than the majority, and I think there's a lot of gray area. I think there are a lot of people who are going to say, look, I agree with Blake Snell, but inevitably, we've got to come back. Someone's got to take the first step. Why not us? And yeah, part of me would like to believe that there's even a large percentage of baseball players who say there are other people who are depending on us to come back, whether or not it's the people working in TV production or when there are slowly but surely people returning to the stadium and people that work in the stadiums and people that work for the teams that, I do think there still are going to be some players who say, I'm hesitant to come back, but we do need to come back. The economy needs us to come back. The sports fans need to come back, so they actually have something to look forward to. So, no, lone wolf, no. But he's in I do think he's in the minority, and I also believe there's a lot of gray area in between.
Scott, you have a percentage for the MLB season?
You know what? When before you started talking, I was thinking 3-2, which is 40%. So yeah, I was thinking 3-2 against. So I'm kind of right alert in the same boat that you are. Not quite as pessimistic as Joe, but I don't think any of the three of us obviously don't think there's a better than 50-50 chance. Now, what I wonder about is if the superstars take a pass, just like Joe says, the guys at the top of the food chain are the ones more likely to have savings to be able to weather this financially. The guys that are living, you think you make $600,000, you think that's a lot of money, but these guys they're paying agents, they've got expenses, and they don't know. And the big thing is they don't know how long they're going to earn it. Will Major League Baseball put out a diluted product? Like the 1987 NFL strike season, or
that's actually what I was going to compare it to. I was actually going to say that you're basically looking at a strike-shortened season with replacement players. I'm not expecting Keanu Reeves and the replacement to show up through the door with Shane Falco, but I'm saying I still think that it's definitely going to hurt. And you also have to wonder from a fan perspective. Let's just say, I mentioned that when I started in this topic, and I said, what if Mike Trout and Aaron Judge and Mookie Betts and all these other superstars decide, you know what, I've made about $100+ million. Why would I really bother doing this when it's not worth my time? You also have to wonder from a fan perspective. Let's just say your team wins the World Series, but basically every star player on every team does not play. Does that really count? Is there an asterisk next to it? How does that work?
As a Royals fan and having that be our only shot at being competitive this season, that would absolutely count. Yes, I would.
Correct. I'm saying it would count for a title, but people would look at it differently. There's no way around it because you're going to have to make the argument, well, yeah, you won, but you're going up against half minor leaguers in the average lineup. I think that's what you're looking at. It's almost the equivalent of superstar players not willing to cross the picket line because they're not making enough money. And I feel like that's of course, it's for different reasons, but the product on the field will most likely consist of, I'd say, average salaries to minor league salaries. It could be what you're looking at. And if that's the case, of course, I think the product's going to be hurt because the MLB tries to market their superstars, and you can't really market Ronald Acuna in your commercials if he's not playing. So I do think that'll have an impact.
Joe, do you think you think the major leagues put out a diluted product? Is that possible? If the top echelon players, if a lot of those guys decide to take a pass, that they just go ahead and plow forward and say, we gave you the opportunity to play. Do you count that year for service? There's a lot of questions that get involved. But the main question is, would the MLB go ahead and just put out a product with whatever players are willing to put on a uniform?
I don't think they will, but if they do, look, it will be a tainted season, but if you're going for all or nothing, we're going to wind up with nothing. I'd rather have a tainted season than no season at all. But yeah, there will definitely be a historical asterisk next to whoever wins the championship. And if some type of record is set, most consecutive home runs or whatever the case is, yeah, there will kind of be at least a historical asterisk. But we're in a brand new world. We're just going to have to settle for a little bit of a lesser product. And you could argue, even if all the players do come back, the product's going to have to suffer because they didn't have a normal training camp and the season's a little bit screwed up. But, I'd rather at least take a somewhat tainted product over nothing whatsoever. But yeah, we're definitely not going to have anything approaching a normal season. I've already conceded that.
Well, I just have one quick question for both of you. It might sound simple, but I'm kind of curious just for the viewers at home. Do you think it would be easier in this circumstance to start a brand new season from scratch like the MLB, or to try to continue where a season was, suspended in the NBA perspective?
I think it's easier to start from scratch. I think that's going to cause you less problems and less controversy. Joe, what do you think?
I don't know, because you have to play so many more games. That's the problem.
Yeah. I would have to disagree with Scott Steen here. I do think if the NBA, at least they would have closer to a full season, I would think that would be slightly less tainted. Now, the part of that question that we have to remember is baseball is more limited by, the weather, the climate, where the NBA could theoretically play, their NBA season deep into August. And of course, it might mean next season would start late. But no, I think the higher the percentage of games that are played, the less quote unquote tainted it's going to be. So I do think the NBA season, if they're able to come back, would be slightly less tainted than Major League Baseball.
Yeah, I mean, some of it also has to do with the makeup of the sport. And when I say that, it's a lot easier, I'd say, I wouldn't say a lot easier, but it's easier for the NBA because of the fact that you have significantly less people on your average roster. So if one person hypothetically would come down with corona, mathematically, it's probably more common for that to happen in baseball than it is for the NBA, because you have roughly, 2 times the amount of players in the MLB?
Yeah, they're expanding the roster to 30 for Major League Baseball. So, yeah.
And how many are on an NBA roster? 12?
12.
That's what I'm saying. So, I mean, mathematically speaking, you're probably more likely to have issues in the MLB than you are in the NBA, not to mention the fact that the NBA still has a large sample size of games played under normal circumstances.
Right.
Yep.
And when the NBA comes back, if they do come back, they probably will be playing a lot more back-to-back-to-back. But of course, in Major League Baseball, where they play virtually every day, I think it'll be a bigger difference, because that, if a guy is going to be out for 13 days, that means he's going to miss, 12 games, where in the NBA, and again, we don't know what a new schedule would look like. They probably would wind up playing a lot of back-to-back games. But I do think that the NBA has a little bit more flexibility, not only because they can extend their season because they're playing indoors, they don't have to worry about the weather, but they're also not used to playing 6 straight days.
Yeah, so just a quick question, though, with regard to both sports. I know we haven't really, talked about the NBA that much, but just in general, I know that Florida recently announced publicly that they're opening their doors to all sports and all leagues and stuff like that. My question there is, do you think it's feasible to potentially divide up the MLB, I'd say, the entire league into 2 sections, kind of like an AL and an NL, but you put one section in maybe Orlando and the other section in maybe Miami? Is that possible?
I personally, I say no. I don't think anybody I don't know. If you do it all in Florida, maybe. When they talked about Arizona being part of the picture, I think that's out of the question.
But I think you'd have to split it up in Florida. I don't think you could have everybody in Miami. I think you'd have to put at least half the teams in one city and the other half in another city. And I don't even know how feasible that is. But realistically, if we're talking about, how this potentially salvage sports by any means is necessary, that might be an option, because Florida seems to be the only sport that's actually willing to just throw everybody under the fire and just say, oh, yeah, you can come here. It's all good.
Joe, what do you think? Is there any kind of remote location, like a situation like that, that's going to work? Or is baseball going to have to play in their home stadiums to give this a chance?
Well, obviously they could do is play in their spring training stadiums, because I think we all agree that there aren't going to be fans in the stands to begin with. And look, the infectious disease experts do agree it's much tougher to spread the disease outdoors. So that's a big plus that the NBA, or I'm sorry, that Major League Baseball has going for them. And I can definitely envision if baseball does come back, it is going to be more like a spring training type scenario. And maybe, like I said, the spring training stadiums could be their home stadiums.
But do you think it would be necessary to basically shut down the towns of those stadiums to prevent the players from getting it? I don't know how you can prevent people from, I don't know, interact. I can't really say interacting, but if everything apparently is back to normal in Florida, which regardless of how stupid you think that is, that's just the reality that it is it really possible to keep these MLB players basically quarantined preemptively to prevent them from catching the disease in a state that pretty much has legalized all normal activity? I don't know how realistic that is.
I think that's why you've got to have frequent testing. I don't think you can isolate these guys. I think you have to let them go out and live their lives. And I think that's why you're going to have frequent testing. So,
and I think that's a disaster waiting to happen, because other people are going to be waiting to resume their lives. And then that's where you're pretty much going to have, I don't want to say a second wave, but the odds of there being a potential issue are probably higher than it should be. I'm assuming we're in agreement on that.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the NBA. We've kind of skirted it a little bit. Adam Silver had a conference call the other day with the owners from the NBA, and I think he's been very realistic. It's been reported that Silver said, if we're going to have to shut down, if we get one positive test, then we probably shouldn't go down the path of looking to reopen. So they're very realistic about the fact that, yes, somebody's going to get it, but you're going to have to take steps once that happens. You're not going to shut down the whole league once you get it wrapped up. Now, they've got kind of a unique situation that they've talked about. They've talked about using what they call like a bubble isolation plan, where you keep half the teams in one place and half the teams in another, kind of a campus environment. The locations that have been mentioned are Orlando's Walt Disney World Resort and places there in Las Vegas. Joe, how do you feel about the NBA? You think they have a more realistic chance and taking a realistic look at what's going on here?
Well, we talked about this off of the air. I do think if baseball is the first to come back, which as of now, that is the plan. I think all the other leagues are going to be keeping an eye on baseball or whatever the first sport is to come back. I don't know if NBA is at that much of an advantage. Like I said, I think baseball, because they are played outdoors, is probably in the best position to come back. But I 100% agree with that. If we're going to shut down the whole league because one player gets it, then there is no need to come back. But I do think it helps, and at least as of right now, LeBron James and I think a couple of the other superstars are like, no, we definitely want to play. And I think that at least based on the anecdotal evidence, based on quotes from players, it does seem like the NBA players are fairly united, at least among the most vocal and most powerful voices, to come back. But I'm not, like I said, now if I had to single out a sport that really is in best position to come back, it probably is baseball. But yeah, the NBA could do almost, like it's an Olympic type thing where they can find an area where there are a few, they might wind up having to use high school gyms, and certainly college and community college and smaller college arenas to play. But it can be done. It can definitely be done. I don't think there's any question about that.
I see some creative solutions. Scott, what do you think about the NBA coming back? You like their chances? And if they do you think they should finish out the regular season or just start the playoffs up?
Well, that's a separate Pandora's box, which I'll get to in a second. But in terms of actually resuming the season, do I think they should? I mean, I'm a fan of live sports, but in reality, no. I just don't think they really should.
Where are they at? About 60 games in?
I think a little bit more. I think probably around 65, maybe. Either or. They still have maybe another. I think they have double-digit games left in the regular season, so that's pretty much all that matters for the sake of this. But I don't know. I really just feel like the season's kind of a lost cause at this point. You took a break for a couple of months, and now you're just going to pretend that everything happened normally. And, oh, yeah, we're all back. Nothing's really changed here. Like, for example, let's just say the Lakers in a quarantine playoffs would make the playoffs again and then lose in the second round. Is that going to affect, players' legacies? Is that going to matter? You lost all momentum that you had building over the course of a couple of months pause and then immediately just resumed back like everything's normal. I just don't see how realistic that actually is. Now you can talk about, should they resume the regular season or whatever. I don't know how you can resume the regular season, but at the same point, do you want your players to go into the playoffs having not shot a basketball for roughly 2 months? Probably not either. So you're kind of caught in a rock and a hard place there. I think you'd have to have at least 2 tune-up game scrimmages, so to speak. I don't think you can just immediately send your players out there for very, very meaningful games, quote unquote, because you might view the games differently. But for playoffs, when they haven't had any experience, at least in the last couple of months when it comes to shooting a basketball and being trapped at home. Now, based on there's been a lot of rumors about the NBA on some ideas they could have. There were some rumors about potentially having half the teams in Florida, half the teams in Vegas, and then trying to work something out there. I don't think that's realistic. There's been rumors lately of creating some type of campus bubble situation where you would just throw all the teams in and just tell them, have fun, just figure it out, and we'll make it all work. In reality, there has been one plan that I actually am a fan of that I do think has some feasibility, and it's actually the Walt Disney plan. And it's the idea of potentially moving all the teams to Disney World for the most part and just having them live in that massive area and just establishing a couple of courts. And I think that idea makes the most sense for me. Since Florida already gave the green light on allowing sports to continue there, I think if you are able to get a couple of indoor courts and you just lock it down, you shut it down, you pretty much do the entire campus idea but on the Disney premises, I actually think that makes some sense. So I think that idea actually is somewhat realistic.
Okay.
Yeah,
and Scott, what do you think the odds are the NBA comes back this season? That there's some finishing of the 2019-2020 season.
The truth is, I think it's higher than baseball, because baseball can just turn around and say, well, we didn't start the season anyway, so I mean, we don't really we could just take the year off. The NBA, I think, is more pressure to continue because you are so far deep into the season. That'll really bring up the service issues, because you have MLB where you can say, well, technically they didn't play, so we're just going to add another year to the contract. We'll just wipe that one clean. Where in the NBA, you can't really do that because they already played the majority of the season. So I think that already is a serious issue with regard to free agency in the future. From percentage-wise, I gave baseball 40%. I'm going to give the NBA, I'd say 55%. I think that there's a decent chance that they realize we're in too deep. We got to try to figure something out here. And I also, once again, say I think it's easier to resume NBA than it is MLB because you have less players on each roster. So I think that there is less danger for a player catching it, so to speak.
Good enough. Joe, do you share this young fella's optimism, or do you think they're kind of in the same boat as Major League Baseball? Do you think the NBA has a better shot at coming back?
I do, for many of the reasons that Scott said. I would probably put it more like, 35% as opposed to about the 20% that I put Major League Baseball for. So many of the reasons that Scott did say. Plus, I would add that they're not necessarily as limited by the calendar because they're not worried so much about the weather. But as exactly as Scott said, they only have to come back for a shorter time. I think they would probably maybe play 10 games left of a regular season. They would probably have a slightly expanded playoffs. It might be just like Major League Baseball, where they would have like the 6, 7, 8, or the 6 through 10 teams play like 1-game playoffs to get down to an 8 team in each conference type thing. So we will have a slightly expanded playoffs, but like I said, it might be a 1 or 3 game type series. But yeah, the NBA definitely has a better chance to come back because they don't need to play quite as many games to get the season completed, and because they're not racing against the calendar quite so much because they're not limited by the weather.
Okay, very good. And what do you like the 2 campus situation, the solution there? Having them at Walt Disney World and then having them somewhere else, or maybe even having everybody at Walt Disney World. Do you think that's the one that's going to feasibly be the answer?
I think the Walt Disney solely one's probably the most likely one, because it's going to be an issue with regard to traveling. If you're going to have half the league in some remote location, the other half in, a specific area in Florida. Now, I mentioned that for baseball, you could have half the teams in Orlando, for example, and half the teams in Miami. But in reality, I think we can agree that with Disney World basically being entirely closed because nobody can go to really amusement parks for the most part, I think that's almost a perfect venue. you pretty much just throw all the players in. You also have to worry about, how many workers are going to get in, and if they're allowed to leave the premises or they have to stay in Disney World. For the most part, you can kind of set up a UFC Fight Island, Tom Hanks Castaway situation, where you basically just say, you're here, deal with it. You can't leave for another 3 months. And I'm not saying that you should hold people in certain areas against their will, but you should allow them to at least sign up for the idea, or, to put their name on a contract which says, we need to stay on the premises, we can't leave. And that way that since no new people are going to be entering the area, your odds of somebody catching coronavirus are reduced to a minimum. So
Okay.
That's my thought.
All right, interesting. All right, guys. So now, you know what? Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Let's talk about the one that really most of us are thinking about, and that is the fall, and that is
hockey.
What's
Oh, no, sorry. My bad.
What happened to hockey? Yeah. Before we do get on the football path, any guys want to say anything about hockey? I mean, this would seem, everything we know about the coronavirus, a hockey arena would seem like the number one place in the world that you would not want to be. It's cold. It preserves the virus close in. Obviously, everything is going to be indoors. Hockey, what do you hear about hockey? Scott, you hear anything?
The truth is no. I think I don't know what's more concerning, the fact that the NHL hasn't actually said anything about the coronavirus up to this point, or the fact that nobody in the U.S. has noticed that the NHL hasn't said anything up to this point, which I feel like just showcases how much of a hockey country this is. I personally love hockey, but if we're talking about the NBA and how they've already played a decent amount of games, now it would be easier for them to resume. Isn't the NHL basically at the same amount of games as the NBA? And it seems like nobody has noticed. I'm just going to throw that out there. I feel like that's definitely worth mentioning.
Joe, what do you think? Any shot of hockey coming back?
Yeah, with the big problem with the NHL is that if it was going to be on like a neutral ice situation, similar to what we're talking about with the NBA at Disney, I would assume it would probably have to be played in Canada, where they have all the junior hockey rinks, where it's much more realistic to have them, in a fairly close geographic area. And I do think most of the infectious disease doctors agree that the coronavirus is going to spread more in a colder climate than it is in a warmer climate, which makes Canada a little bit of a tougher choice. So I do think hockey most definitely has some of the unique challenges that the NBA does not, unless there's somewhere in the U.S. where there really are quite a few hockey rinks close together, especially the southern U.S., which would be, which would be preferable to it being played, in Minnesota or whatever. They probably would rather play it in a warmer climate where the disease is less likely to spread. So yeah, for those reasons, I do think the NHL is the least likely of the major sports to come back.
Well, personally speaking, are you basically waving the flag on the NHL season continuing? Because I am for the most part.
Yeah, I think it's 5%.
Yeah.
That
sounds about right.
I think that's realistic. All right, guys, let's talk about the NFL. Now, the NFL, they have charted an unusual tack here. They went ahead and they did their draft. Of course, they did their draft remotely, but they did not delay the draft. They didn't push it back. They didn't modify it, other than having everybody, of course, stay in their well-apportioned rooms, basements, whatever. But they've not modified their schedule. They announced their schedule last week. They have not officially said that the games would go forth without fans. In fact, I'm still getting season ticket notifications in my timelines on Facebook and through social media. I went to the Chiefs site yesterday. You can buy individual game tickets. There is a coronavirus disclaimer, of course, that you'll get your money back if they're canceled. But the NFL seems to be the league that has put their hands over their ears and said la 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 for now. They've really not modified anything at all. A little bit of OTAs, but they're looking at different spots to open training camps. A lot of them are looking at locations in the states where the curve is already flattened or is on the downslope. So, Joe, this is the one that I think everybody wants to know about. What's going to happen with the NFL? Joe Duffy, you get first crack at it, buddy.
Well, Scott, I disagree that the NFL, they're kind of putting their fingers in their ears. I think that because they don't have to worry about starting until September, they're obviously hoping, like we all are, that, Dr. Fauci's going to come on TV someday and say, you know what, we found this medicine that's made, it may not be a cure, but we're making great progress on this disease. And I don't think they want to make any, and they shouldn't make any rash decisions. Of course, they are going to monitor how things go in Major League Baseball and, you know, the NBA if that does return. But then again, unless we do make some major breakthroughs in medicine, right now the infectious disease experts are saying that the coronavirus will make a reappearance in the fall. So I think there's just way too much uncertainty involved in between now and the week after Labor Day than there is for Major League Baseball or the NBA. So I do think that the NFL shouldn't make any rash decisions. And as of right now, they should make plans to start the NFL season, even if it's not realistic, because the other alternative is to make too rash of a decision. So there's plenty of uncertainty there, but I think the NFL is taking the right approach, even if starting and having a full 16-game season isn't all that realistic. Right now, they still have to prepare for that possibility. All
right, good take. Scott, you feel the same way? Was I too harsh on the NFL for their what I kind of perceived as a lack of acknowledgement of the situation, or are you more in the Joe camp that they're taking the right approach with kind of going slow with the wait and see and proceeding as if everything will be normal in 3 months?
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with their current approach. At no point have they done anything outlandish, in my opinion. What you have to remember is that even though people are all predicting what's going to happen in the future and what it's going to be in the next couple of months, nobody knows. It's a guessing game at this point. So you can make the argument saying, well, the NFL hasn't taken a stance, and I kind of agree with Joe, where I'm okay with them not taking a stance and for them to just wait it out and to see if anything improves in the immediate future. Is anything going to improve? Probably not. But I don't see the harm in the wait and see approach that the NFL is trying to do before they put all their eggs in one basket on resuming the season or on starting the season or not starting the season. So I'm personally okay with it. In reality, it's the same issue that you have with the other leagues, but I'd say to a bigger degree in the NFL and in the sense for ratings. And the NFL knows if they host the product, millions of people are going to watch it. I don't think it really matters who's playing. I think that people are obsessed with football more than any other sport in the country. And the NFL knows if they put any product out at all, millions will watch it. And I feel like the XFL was a good example of that in the sense that they had a bunch of NFL rejects and a bunch of people who might not have even made it to the NFL at any point. And yet people were still watching that program almost every Saturday. And there's a reason why the ratings, of course, they were better early on in the season. The XFL ended up getting shut down from the corona. Before that, I think people can agree that the ratings were surprisingly good. And I think that's just because of the fact that everyone loves football and they'll watch it under any circumstance.
Except they had taken the same path that all other leagues have taken other than the NFL. They did great premiere. Next week they're down. The third week they're down a lot. And
no, I agree. I'm not saying that the ratings were sustainable. What I am saying is that I think we can agree that since the ratings were higher than people originally anticipated, they were able to stay afloat, so to speak, because of football, regardless of how good the quality is. Now, what I'm saying is the NFL, I don't think you have to worry about that drop-off. I think people are just obsessed with live football on television, and they would watch it really regardless of who was playing. That's all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and the other thing about the NFL is that is probably the professional league that is least dependent on the revenue generated from actual attendance. It is all driven by that TV money, and yeah, I think that for that reason, I think they're the ones that are going to be. I think they're going to be the ones that are most likely to start without a lot of assurances. I think they are going to probably risk the most to get their season started, maybe more so than the other leagues because they are so dependent on that TV revenue. Joe, what do you think about the NFL? We're going to see it this year?
No, I 100% agree with you, Scott, that the NFL is, look, I saw where both Al Michaels and Chris Collinsworth, they said that they will voluntarily take a pay cut, which is interesting because probably if there is an NFL season, their ratings are going to skyrocket because people aren't going to be able to see the games in person. I think we're going to need, this distraction. But the NFL, I think they have the best chance of playing simply because hopefully a lot's going to happen between now and then in a positive sense as far as any medical breakthroughs. But yeah, you're right that the NFL can play in front of empty stadiums and it'll still be 100% sustainable. So, but I still would bet against the NFL having a full season. I sure as heck hope that I'm wrong, but the thing that NFL has on their side right now is time. And when it comes to the CDC changing their guidelines and maybe some advances in medicine, 1 month is a very long time. 2 months a very long time. So there's a lot that can happen between now and then. But yeah, the NFL, they can afford to wait.
All right, very good. And yeah, just touching briefly on the football situation, moving on to the college ranks. All of the conferences have suspended their off-season activities, their OTAs, if you will, until at least June 1st. And this is a situation that is starting to look like, because the NCAA came out the other day and said we have no authority to issue an overriding edict that applies to everyone. So they're basically leaving it up to each individual conference. Joe, is this going to be a season where the SEC plays but the Pac-12 doesn't?
It's a definite possibility. I think the NCAA said, look, if we're not going to have kids on campuses, if the kids aren't allowed back on campuses, we're not going to have the football players play. So I do think at best, if there is a college football season, it is not going to be with every conference. It's not going to be with every single team. And you're right, it may just be, the ACC and the SEC. So we will have a very limited college football schedule at best. I think a normal college football season, I'm going to put that at 10%. Some semblance of a college football season, I'll put that at 35%.
Okay. Scott, what do you think? How do you like those percentages from Joe? Do you think those track pretty well?
The truth is, I think they're a little bit too optimistic based on how the numbers are. The main issue for me is what just was announced in California. And I think that could be a true sign of things to come. If you don't know what I'm talking about, California, you had roughly 20-something universities already announced that they've shut down their campus for the fall. And whether or not it's premature to announce that already, I personally think it's kind of ridiculous. I think you can make that announcement in a month or so or now. I don't really know why you have to announce it now.
Well, it does give the kids that are students an opportunity to do something else if they wanted to go to another school, or, it does give them a heads up if you're planning on making a decision about where you're going to go to college in the fall.
I guess. Let's just say hypothetically that things get better by then you just drove away half your student base. But yes, I understand why they might have done it as a common courtesy. But for college sports, that's a disaster zone because of the fact that if it's already been announced that some colleges are not going to be having people on campus, then that clearly means their student athletes aren't going to be on campus either. So that's not really a good sign moving forward. If you want to talk about how concerned I am for the state of college sports from the presidential scale, so to speak, they're at DEFCON 2. It's not good. That's how I'll phrase it. DEFCON 1's the worst if you don't know what I'm talking about. DEFCON 2 is where I'd put it.
Well, I think we've all seen War Games, Scott.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. I'd put it at DEFCON 2, not good. And you also have to wonder how much that will impact future seasons of college sports because college football generates such a large percentage of revenue that a lot of colleges might have to shut down some of their other teams, whether it's the rowing team or the softball team or even the baseball team in some schools. They might not be able to stay afloat. And I think you might see a ton of scholarships that were once offered for other athletic programs cease to being offered in the future. And I think that's a serious problem that is pretty much going to happen. It's just the way it is. College football generates such a large percentage of money that you don't really have a choice.
Yeah, Joe, let's talk about that just for a minute. Because as we all know, and we touched on it briefly in a couple other videos, college football is the big money generator for college sports. In fact, in most schools, college football is the only one that makes that actually makes money, and it sustains the entire sports department. A little bit of money thrown in for March Madness, a little bit of money thrown in for the various sports at other schools. I know KU makes a lot off of basketball, but generally speaking, football is the money generator for all of these schools. What does it do to these conferences, especially some of the smaller conferences? What does it do to the Sun Belt. What does it do to CUSA football? Are teams going to have to discontinue their programs? Joe, what kind of collateral damage do you think not having a 2020 football season is going to do to these colleges?
But you bring up outstanding points because, look, even these smaller conferences could make some good revenue with their the smaller TV network contracts. I do think the NCAA, they're eventually going to have to back off of what they said. If kids can't come to campus, then the football players can't play, because it's just a practicality issue. Look, I'm wearing my Ohio State shirt. It's a lot easier to bring back 80 football players and 15 coaches and all the trainers than it is 20,000 students and all the professors and have them living on campus, et cetera. So I do think that because of the pure number of people involved, I do think that's a bad approach, and that's something that's going to have to be taken into consideration about how much are these smaller conferences, the Mid-American Conference, they're going to be losing a lot of revenue. So I really believe that there's a pretty good chance the NCAA is going to kind of back off of that statement, because there are legitimate financial and even practical reasons why I don't think that was a fair ultimatum to basically make.
Yeah, a big part of the budgets of these schools, like Louisiana Tech, they get $500,000 for going to Florida State and taking their yearly ass whipping. So, that's going to hurt from an individual school standpoint as well. I just don't. I think the NCAA. I think that was. I'm with you, Joe. I think that was a very cavalier thing to say, and a lot of the reaction to this virus has been a little cavalier. It's like, well, you know what? We're going to have this wide sweeping solution, and we don't really care about any of the little guys or any of the collateral damage.
It's a lot easier to say stuff before actually having to act on it, and I feel like that's a completely separate animal that we have not fully gone involved with.
You're right, and I don't want to go down that rabbit hole to much of a degree here. That is definitely at least another show. So
I just thought it was worth mentioning how you can say, oh, we plan on doing X, Y, and Z, but there's another thing between saying I'm gonna get a six-pack in the next 2 weeks as opposed to actually working out 7 hours a day. It's a lot different just to say it as opposed to putting in the work to do it.
I was thinking somewhere like I'm gonna probably get a six-pack tonight. So
yeah.
All right, very good. So now let's talk about as we wrap up here, talking about American sports. Now there are sports around the country, around the world that are making plans. If they haven't already fired up, we talked about the KBO, the Korean Baseball Organization. They're playing. The Taiwanese baseball is playing. Of course, as always, venerable Eastern European ping pong goes on. But Scott, they've got a plan in place for the Bundesliga to start up again here in roughly a month or so. I know there's been talk about getting the English Premier League going. Scott, what do you like from overseas? What do you think we're going to see here soon?
I think it depends on the current state of the league, and I know that sounds like a massive cop out, but in reality, is there really a point besides the teams that are in relegation? I guess is there really a point to resume the league when Liverpool's basically 60 points ahead of everybody else? Probably not. You already know who's going to win the championship. It seems like a complete waste of time to me. And England has been a little bit of a hotbed for the virus in itself, not to the same degree as Brazil is currently at this point in time. So I don't think a Brazilian soccer league is going to be starting anytime soon. But if you want to compare it to the other leagues, Bundesliga is a little bit more up in the air, even though Bayern tends to win the championship every year. So I think you might be more likely to see stuff happen there than England. At the end of the day, didn't Liverpool's mayor specifically say you shouldn't start up the league again? I'm pretty sure that happened. So of course the club and the fans want to resume the league because they want to celebrate Liverpool winning its first league championship in I don't know how many years. It's probably been at least 20 or 30. But when the mayor of your city says don't resume the league, I don't really think you should resume the league. That's just my thoughts on that for England. I think that just because the Bundesliga is going to start up again doesn't mean other leagues are going to follow suit. Maybe Ligue 1 in France is going to start up again. I'm doubtful on that as well.
What do you call it?
It's Ligue 1, but I believe they pronounce it Ligue 1 in France. So, I mean, PSG wins that league every year as well, but you kind of have to wonder. I think really depends on each individual country. And I'm not going to say that, just because country A is starting it up, country B and C is going to follow. I don't see that happening. I think it depends on the current state of the individual country itself. But Bundesliga is going to start up again. Is that smart? I don't know. They pretty much said that didn't an entire team or 4 players from a specific team in the Bundesliga test positive for Corona last week, and they pretty much just quarantined the entire team and said, "Don't worry about it. You'll be right." And I'm just thinking, what are you talking about? What are we doing here? But that's basically what happened. And you have to wonder if other leagues will follow, and I personally disagree. I think the Bundesliga is in the vast minority when it comes to soccer leagues in Europe starting up again.
All right, very good. Joe, I guess there's no more sign of the times than the fact that we are spending time in the middle of what should be NBA playoffs and Major League Baseball. Instead, we are talking about the Bundesliga. Joe, what do you?
I grew up watching it, Soccer Made in Germany. I used to love to watch that when I was a young kid. But yeah, the fact that we're talking about the state of sports rather than actual handicapping stuff is kind of heartbreaking, I guess. I mean, I'm ecstatic you guys asked me to be on, but I wish we were actually talking about, games that are going to be played tonight or next week. But yeah, we are certainly in uncharted waters and unique times, to say the least.
Well, just in case you're worried, Joe, we'll give you a chance to show off your 3-time Max Bomb KBO plays at the end. So you still have time to talk about live plays if you want to.
I do have my KBO 14 parlay of the year guaranteed, or the rest of the season free.
Is it a Maxwell play or is it a double Maxwell play?
I think it's a quadruple max play.
That's a lot of whales. That's 4 whales for you counting at home. That's 4 whales.
I own the KBO.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. Well, all right. So we're gonna get out of here. But before we go, I want to check with our guests, and I want to check with Scott. Joe, you're going to go first. What sport are we most likely to see here in the United States? If you had to put your money, what are we going to be watching first? And when?
Yeah, I guess I will go with baseball because I think there's at least a possibility they'll start this. No, you know what? I take it back. I do think it'll be the NFL. I think it'll be the NFL, and I think they will at least give it a shot the week after Labor Day. And, yeah, that's my official prediction.
All right. Very good. Scott, what do you say?
I think it's a tough call, but I'm going to go with cornhole. No, actually, though, I'm going to go with the NBA. And the reason why is even if not much progress has been made, I actually do appreciate the fact that the NBA and Commissioner Silver seem to be in constant communication with the players to try to get back as quickly as possible. So from a communication perspective, I'm actually a big fan of what the NBA has been doing and how they've done the exact opposite of the NHL. And they've actually tried to talk to the players on almost a regular day basis. There's still some divide there with some representatives of the Players Association, naturally so. But I am a bit optimistic on the fact that they are constantly communicating with each other. And I do think there will be some type of compromise or agreement reached in the, I'd say, somewhat immediate future. So for that reason, plus the NBA being so far along and all the players wanting to resume, and how Adam Silver met with the board of governors and how they left pretty optimistic, feeling optimistic about, the future of the season itself. So I'm going to go with the NBA, but I don't think we're going to be seeing anything before July. And I feel like the NBA, assuming they stick to the campus bubble quarantine extravaganza plan, I think that's pretty much what we're looking at. So I'm going to go with the NBA.
All right. And this is why this is a fantastic show, because we've got 3 of us on here. We're going to end up having 3 different opinions on this question. I think it's going to be Major League Baseball. I think that this plan has been floated for a reason. I think the owners have floated this plan in order to generate public pressure on the players to make some concessions, to accept it, and to get going. There are a lot of questions that they're going to have to answer. One of the biggest, of course, is, how do you justify that many tests? Of course, they're not doing the daily tests that are in more demand. But at the end of the day, I think baseball is the one that is going to get something in place. And I think they start playing by the middle of July. I think 2 months from now, we will have Major League Baseball. So there you go. Guys, this has been fun. This has been kind of a show that Scott and I have threatened to do here for about a month, and we kind of wanted to have some of the leagues make a move and make some announcements before we decided to do this show. and it's been very informative. I wouldn't be surprised if we need to go back and revisit this probably, maybe a month from now and see where everything is. Joe, fantastic job. Can't thank you enough. Appreciate you fitting us into what is no doubt a very busy schedule down there in Atlanta.
No, thank you guys for having me on. And heck, if you do have me on in a month, I want to be able to say you guys were right. I was the biggest pessimist, and I am wrong. But I don't think that's going to be the case. But let's hope I am wrong.
I mean, I'm not going to sell you too far short. We were all pretty pessimistic. You were just more pessimistic than the two of us. So
yeah, nobody was really 50-50 on anything.
Well, it's not like we're on the opposite side of the spectrum in a quote-unquote "I told you so" fashion. No, we're all on the same side here. It's just a matter of you being a little bit further along on the side is how I phrase it.
Yep, you're right. And I do want to remind everybody that once sports get going again, make sure you check out Joe's site. One of the great guys in the business. He's been doing this a long time. Make sure you check out offshoreinsiders.com. Follow him on Twitter at Offshore Insider. Of course, follow Scott and I on Twitter over there. We were kind of in the same boat. Instead of winners and whiners, we are winners, whiners on the Twitter side. He is Reichel Radio on the personal page. I am Steamroller on my Twitter page as well. And Joe is at Cal Vulcan. Is that right? Cal_Vulcan?
Yeah, no. That's my people are welcome to follow my personal page. Yeah, my personal page where I talk a lot of restaurants is Cal Vulcan, one word, CAL, as in Cal, short for California, Vulcan. It's all one word. Okay,
very good. And yeah, he does a great job doing a lot of restaurant reviews. If you follow Joe on his personal page, you will definitely be hungry. And it's I'm anxious for Joe to get both of his jobs restarted down there, as we're all anxious to get out and about. So again, thank you guys very much for being here. We had a blast. It wasn't the most optimistic show. We didn't blow a lot of sunshine up your skirt, but I think we did have a very realistic look at the state of sports in America and the world. So hopefully, and I think Joe put it best at the very beginning of the show, hopefully we're all wrong. Hopefully they're all going to fire up. We are incredible pessimists, and we're completely wrong, and we will be revisiting now a month from now to do previews on all the sports that are going to be firing up. So we'll see what happens. We appreciate you guys watching. As always, drop us a comment in the comment section. Let us know what you think. What's going to start up? Tell us what sport you think is going to go first and what sport has no shot at getting going this season. And we'll be happy to have a little comment there in the comment section. So until tomorrow, Scott, what are we doing tomorrow?
We can fully discuss that. I mean, we could work on it, but overall, I plan on looking at the NFC on the playoff odds to see what the odds were for specific teams to make the playoffs, where there's some value plays, where the money should be coming in, stuff of that nature.
Okay.
Unless there's something else to talk about, that seems to be the direction that we plan on going with earlier in the week.
You know what? Tune in tomorrow. You guys will find out what we're going to have. We'll see. We did talk about our NFL props as far as making the playoffs, so we'll see if we get that fired up. But until then, I am Scott Steen. He is Scott Reichel. We were joined today by Joe Duffy. Again, thanks again, Joe. You guys take care. Have a great Friday. Congratulations, everybody. You made it to the end of the week. And for those of you that don't really care about the days, it's Friday. So, yeah, just take note. All right? You guys take care. Come back to see us tomorrow. Until then, everybody have a good day. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.